Then Sports Central, we go for a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 7 matchup between the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies, two of your top teams in the Pac-12. As we look forward to Week 7, you got Oregon. This is a team that is built to win this season. They're one of the most complete teams in the nation, probably the best defense in the Pac-12, and they're taking on Washington, a team that's probably got the best offense in the country. You consider Michael Penix, the receiving core and everything. This is bound to be an incredible matchup between two teams that very well could end up in the college football playoff this season. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today. Let's get started with their team trends. Oregon beat Stanford in their last matchup 42-6. Dominant win for the Ducks. This team has been very dominant this season since their close game at Texas Tech, which was back in Week 2. But otherwise, both teams have been very dominant this season, except for one game. And for Washington, that did come in their last matchup against Arizona. They beat them 31-24, but a pretty close matchup in the end there. But otherwise, the Huskies have been brutally dominant. Offensively, they have being their opponents big every matchup. They have allowed a decent amount of points in comparison to Oregon, but so far this season, there's no doubt you got two really dominant football teams here. Games be on Saturday, October 14th in Seattle. So the Huskies, the home team for this matchup. Kickoff is 12:30 p.m. Pacific. Spread's going with Washington by 3 here. So Huskies are barely favored, as you'd probably expect. You'd expect it to be close. You got two very similar football teams here, especially competitively. And I feel like, obviously both teams have their own strengths. Washington is definitely offensively, and for Oregon is the defense. But, Washington being at home does make a difference as well. Over under 67.5. FPI is going with Oregon. So one of the rare times where the FPI disagrees with the spread. Your series history, Washington leads at 61-48. Huskies won the last matchup last season, but Oregon does lead the series in the past 10 matchups, 7-3. Here's that comparison. Oregon 4th in the country in points per game, 6th in points allowed. So even though Oregon is probably known for their defense so far this season, they've also been incredible offensively. And you consider so far this season, back in Week 1, we knew from the start when they put up 81 in Week 1. I know they played Portland State in Week 1, but if you're putting up 81 points in Week 1, you're obviously doing something right. And then obviously 38 after that against Texas Tech. And then the past few games, they've been dominant, and also that goes to the defense as well. So, statistically, even though Oregon is also ranked a bit lower than Washington, they maybe are the better team statistically in this matchup. In fact, I'd probably say it's safe to say that they're 13th in pass yards a game, 19th in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, they're 16th in pass defense, 12th in rush defense. But if you compare that with Washington, the Huskies passing game is as dangerous as we've seen in a long time. And you consider Michael Penix throwing for over 2,000 yards so far this season, and the receiving core of this team with Odunze and Polk and McMillan. I know this team is 95th in rush yards a game, but this team doesn't need to be a big rushing team because of how talented they are in the receiving core and with Michael Penix. So, all things considered, I'd probably say there's a strong argument that Washington is the best offense in the country. Now, defensively, this team has shown to be a bit vulnerable so far this season, but I will say this as well. You consider the first 3 matchups, Boise allowed 19 against them, allowed 10 against Tulsa, and then 7 against Michigan State. They allowed 32 against Cal and then 24 against Arizona in the past 2 matchups. But against Cal, this team was up 45-something at halftime against Cal, and those 32 points were mainly allowed during the second half when it was garbage time pretty much. So you consider that, but obviously 24 against Arizona was allowed fairly throughout the game. It was a competitive matchup. But if you look at it defensively, though, this team is 38th in rush defense, 76th in pass defense. So obviously for Washington, going to have to be strong against the pass in this matchup. Bo Nix is an incredible quarterback who's already passed for nearly 1,500 yards this season, 15 touchdowns, a pick. You got two really incredible quarterbacks going head-to-head in this game. Your recent matchups, Oregon, obviously, they beat Stanford and Colorado, both by a score of 42-6. Beat Hawaii 55-10. Obviously took care of Texas Tech in the end, 38-30. Close game there in Lubbock there in Week 2, but got it done. And obviously the win over Portland State. And for the Huskies on the other side, the close win over Arizona, beat Cal 59-32. blew out Michigan State 41-7 on the road, and obviously the two dominant wins over Tulsa and Boise State. Your key points: Oregon 5-0, Bo Nix. I mean, this team is built to win. Really, both teams are built to win. And we consider, last season, the Pac-12 was an incredible conference last year as well. But you had four mainly relevant teams last season in the conference. You had USC, you had Oregon, Washington, and Utah. I'd probably argue UCLA was in there as well. And you could say Oregon State was on the outside. But truth is, Oregon and Washington are both more experienced this season. That's why the Pac-12 is such a incredible conference this year, is because most of these great teams returned most of their key players. And so now this season, instead of 4 to 6 relevant teams, now you got 6 to 8, I would say, in the Pac-12 this season. And it's pretty insane that this is pretty much considered the final Pac-12 matchup between these two teams as well. Both teams obviously headed to the Big Ten next season. That's going to be quite a change. But for both teams, obviously, this is, for Pac-12 hopes and for this season, this is a critical matchup when you consider it from all perspectives. But for Oregon, forcing turnovers, starting quick will be crucial. Obviously, shutting down the Huskies' offense will be key to winning this matchup. I feel like Oregon's going to be able to score on this Washington defense, but it's just the offense. Can they stop Michael Penix and this receiving core that is as brutal as it is? But and this really applies for both teams as well, but a win sends the Ducks into college football playoff contention, into true college football playoff contention. After this matchup, the winner of this game is probably going to be ranked probably top 5, I would imagine, maybe even top 4. I'll probably be ranking. I've got the Huskies at number 3 right now in my top 25, and I think I've got Oregon at number 7. But the winner of this game should be very much considered a national contender. And in years past where a Pac-12 team has made it to the playoff, they're usually not considered a big favorite. But this year, I feel like it's a different story this year. You got so many talented teams in the Pac-12. And at this point, I would consider Oregon and Washington to probably be the two best teams in the conference. USC's been good so far this season, but they've shown some questionable areas as well, especially on defense. So, the Ducks and the Huskies are built to go all the way this season. I really do believe that. But the Huskies on the other side, this team is experienced. They are brutal to stop. Penix leads an explosive, dangerous offense. We've seen that multiple times this season. If you let the Huskies get up on you a couple of touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, good luck getting back into it, because the Huskies have a brutal offense that they are dangerous and they can score on you in a blink of an eye. But for Washington, they got home field advantage, a crucial matchup as well when you consider it all the way around, and such a competitive conference in the Pac-12 as well. You got to get to that Pac-12 title game, or else your hopes of the college football playoff are pretty much gone. So that's why in such a competitive conference, this is a huge matchup. And so with that, let's get to the prediction here for Oregon and Washington coming up here in Week 7. And in the end, this one went back and forth, but in the end, I'm giving the Huskies the edge. 45-38 is my predicted final score. I feel like Washington, this offense, and Michael Penix, they are built to win this matchup. And it's going to be close. I think Oregon puts up a lot of points and keeps it close and puts the pressure on. But for the Huskies and this offense, I feel like they find a way. And for Oregon, they've got an incredible defense. I think this Oregon team is very well able to win this matchup. Their defense is good enough. Their offense is definitely good enough. But this Washington team is just different offensively. Michael Penix and the receiving core and everything. This is an offense really similar to what you usually see out of Ohio State in the Big Ten with the receivers. And this Washington receiving core is even better, I really do feel, than most Ohio State receiving cores, especially this season. So that's I'm going Huskies 45-38. So I'll say 55% towards the Huskies. I think being at home for Washington does help them as well. I'm going to say the over for sure. I see this being a high-scoring shootout in this one for sure. I've got it way over that 67.5, and I've got Washington covering the spread in the end. But an incredible matchup coming up here in Week 7. Definitely the best win of the weekend. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.